My mom and I were super close, and we spent a lot of time together. We had a mantra for the two of us that we were only going to do what we could do, and we would forgive each other for all the rest. If there was something that didn't happen that should have, we didn't stake on it. It was always just, we did what we could, and that's where we are, and we're okay with that. I think that was very helpful for me growing up, and for her as well. It took some pressure off of both of us. So I think being present and being forgiving are two really big things. Advice for both mothers and their children.
Very, very good. Such wisdom, such wisdom. Mom, release yourself of so many things. You most likely had no idea you were going to be raising your child or your children as the solo parent. And so grace is necessary and forgiveness. Forgive yourself. Forgive your children. Again, we're all grieving. Grief doesn't look good on anyone. And we are going to make mistakes. We do make mistakes. And yet we learn and we keep moving forward and we give lots of grace and forgiveness. Welcome to Raising Fatherless Kids, where we believe that
God is a father to the fatherless.
God is a father to the fatherless.
God is the father to the fatherless.
God is a father to the fatherless.
Welcome to Raising Fatherless Kids. I'm your host, Lori Apon, and I'm so excited to have another Trophy of Grace on the podcast today. Emaline Montgomery is here to share her story with us. Welcome, Emaline.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So glad you're here. I've had the joy of watching Emaline grow up from probably a middle schooler, and then she went through high school and went off to college. And so I'm so thrilled to be able to have Emaline here today to share her story. Moms, it's so important for us to hear these testimonies of God's faithfulness. Revelation says that we defeat the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And so Emaline is here just to share how God has been faithful to her when she experienced the loss of an absent dad. So Emaline, let's start with that. Why don't you just share your story of how, sadly, you became what we call a fatherless young lady. And moms, I said this on another episode with a Trophy of Grace. You probably never thought of the term fatherless. And even one of mine said, I didn't like the label fatherless. And the reason I use that term is because that's the term God uses. Psalm 68:5 says that he is a father to the fatherless. And I would have never used that term either had I not been given that verse as an anchor the night before my husband died. So anyways, Emaline, take it away.
I lost my father when I was 13 years old. He had been helping our neighbor cut down a very large tree, and he fell off the top of a 25-foot ladder. He suffered some injuries, including a broken hip, and after the hip surgery, he developed a blood clot, which eventually took his life very suddenly. We were not prepared. We didn't know it was coming.
Wow. So he fell off a 25-foot ladder. Were you at home when that happened?
I was at school when that happened. I came home to my neighbor's house and stayed with them until my mom could come get me.
And how long was he in the hospital?
He was in the hospital about 5 days at first.
And then he came home after that?
He was home for about 2 weeks. And then I was actually at my best friend's birthday party, and I had a weird pain in my ear, and I went home early from a birthday party, which I had never done. My best friend I lived at her house, basically. We were super close. So I went home early for the first time ever. And we spent the whole day together on a Sunday, and the next Monday morning, he died very suddenly. So I'm grateful that I had that ear pain to spend the whole last day with him.
Absolutely. And what was his condition? Was he sick, in pain? Did he know he had the blood clot at that time?
No, we didn't know about the blood clot until afterwards. So that whole day, he was just in recovery. It was very sweet. He was in pain. He had several broken bones, and he was still recovering from surgery. But it was sweet to have a final last day together. he played with me. We had dinner together.
Wow, what a gift from God. And some of our listeners may be able to recall those last minutes with your loved one as well. If it was by death, I know that's part of the process as we go back and relive, thinking, if I had only known that was going to be my last conversation or my last time with my dad or my husband. For those of you who have experienced loss in a different way, divorce, desertion, maybe your children's father is in and out of your life, and it's not my experience, but there may not be a last conversation as Emaline is describing. But for you, Emaline, God was working in a way that you didn't even know. So all of a sudden he dies suddenly. And what was that like for you?
It was pretty scary. I was home when it happened. I woke up around the time that the ambulance arrived. So rode to the hospital in the back of my neighbor's car. And then they took us to a private waiting room, which was the first sign that maybe this wasn't going to go well.
Oh, wow. You and your mom were together?
Yes, me and my mom and my neighbor were all together. So the doctor came in and told us what happened, and we spent probably several hours at the hospital. I'm not really sure, but people from the church came around us and came to the hospital. Some of them went to our house and brought food to our house so that there'd be things there when we got home. It was a very sweet time of people coming together and helping us that we didn't even know were there for us. It's really a God thing and wonderful.
It is so important to have that community. I refer to the early days, months, maybe even years of the body of Christ that rallies around us. I call that our glitter Band-Aid, because when we get injured, for me, I wasn't a Band-Aid mom, and I sure learned the value and importance of a Band-Aid when I would put that on my child's cut, their wound. And even if I couldn't really even see anything, now we know death is different, but that Band-Aid was amazing. And so you experienced immediately. It is amazing how it rushes in like those antibodies in our own physical body will rush in when there's a cut or infection, and it stays until the real work of healing has to begin. So what did it look like for you after the initial rush of all the people bringing food, bringing meals, and then moving forward?
Well, people stayed around for a long time. For the whole first week, I missed school the whole first week, and my friends would come over every day after school and just sit with me. Even if I didn't feel like talking, we would sit on my swing set outside and they'd just be with me, which was really nice. They were definitely there for me, and sometimes they'd help in more practical ways, bringing me homework and helping me figure out things that I'd missed. But most of the time, what I remember most is just them being around and just sitting there, making sure I always had a stuffed animal to hold.
Gift of presence really is a present, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And often we think, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And we know for Job, he described his friends miserable comforters when they opened their mouths. The first few days they were silent. And so those of you who are listening who maybe you're not a widow, a single mom, or a fatherless young person, you're listening because you want to know how to help. And that's one of the number one ways to help in the initial days and even beyond, is just to be present. And you don't have to worry about saying the right thing or doing the right thing. It's just being there, which I love. So they were there for the first week. What about on into the first year, the second year they remained?
Yes, they did. We also had several men from our church who came around us. My best friend's dad, and then several men from my parents' Sunday school class who came around and made sure that I always had someone I could go to if I needed a man's help, like with a guy that wouldn't leave me alone, or if there was anything that my dad would do, that there was always somebody there who wanted to help me. with something like that. And it wasn't the same, it never replaces, but it was comforting to know I had people to call if I needed.
Emaline, that's incredible. That is amazing. Isn't always the story for others. Sometimes they really, really, really want other men in their lives. The moms want mentors, and that's challenging when they don't have that. Yet God can still work. I often say there may be a mentor in the distance that when your child looks back, they'll be able to say, yeah, that greeter at church every Sunday would ask about my game or whatever. And it looks different for every family, but I really am encouraged to hear of the men and the couples and the people who were there for you. 4 years. I remember, and I don't want to jump the gun. Maybe I'll wait. I remember especially what happened at your 16th birthday, but let's just talk about the reality. So you're 13, you're entering into the teenage years. And what were some of the challenges? What were some of the hurdles? Did you have some form of a mid-faith crisis, or you were questioning, God, why did you take my dad? What did that look like for you?
Well, I really didn't have a major crisis of faith. I struggled with the why, but I never questioned God having a plan. I didn't agree with his plan, but I never questioned that it was a plan. And I knew that he was taking care of me and my mom. And I could see the people he was putting in our life and the way that he was caring for us, even in my dad's absence, even if I didn't like it. I really didn't have so much of a crisis of faith as I know many do, and understandably so.
That's again God's amazing grace over your life. Ladies, I had another young lady. I think she's already been on at the time that we release this conversation, but Adeline also testified at age 13. She never doubted God. And both of these young ladies, I pray, can give you hope, but maybe you're thinking, that's not what my 13-year-old is thinking. That's not what my 13-year-old is going through. And we can't explain that. Everyone's different and all circumstances are different. And yet God is the same. I love that. Emaline, you're being honest. I didn't like the plan. And I don't know that we have to always like the plan. Jesus, going to the cross, said, not my will, but thine be done. He surrendered. He asked 3 times that God would change the plan. Is there any other way? And so there's a mystery about God's will for our lives, and we trust in that mystery. I say that often. It takes time, trusting in the mystery of eternity. And I'm thankful to hear that that's what you've done. So, so what was it like when you came? Did you have father-daughter activities that these men stepped in for, or you said they even protected you from the boys who wouldn't leave you alone, and you're beautiful. So we're glad that you had that protection, but God is also over everything. So what were some of those milestones that you experienced as you were going through middle school and on into your high school graduation and then off to college?
My best friend's dad was very much. We had already been close because I was really close with the whole family, but he always made sure to sit down with me when I was at their house and just ask how I was doing. And that was something small that, looking back, was actually a really big thing. It was always nice to know that he cared about me and he wanted to know how I was doing. And another really close friend's father was very influential in teaching me how to drive. I was very scared to learn how to drive, and I waited a lot longer than a lot of people do. So he took me out on the first few times practicing and really got me through a lot of the anxiety. He wasn't afraid to reach over and grab the wheel if I did something wrong, which was nice. Yes, that really helped me with my confidence in driving. That had been something I was really nervous about because it was always going to be my dad who taught me how to drive.
Wow. So maybe you were bumping up a little grief in that I don't want to even try to learn to drive. Maybe there was more wrapped up in that in fear of driving, but my dad's supposed to be here to help me with this and he's not. And I think I'll just wait until, and just to have a man that came along. What a blessing for your mom. I know teaching a young person to drive is worse than potty training as far as I'm concerned. And to have someone step into that role, and a man especially, was just really a gift. And so, how old were you when you got your driver's license?
I think I got it like 18 and a half.
Okay. And that's really not uncommon. So, we would rather you stay off the road and work through the anxiety than to get out there before you really feel ready. But what was it like once you got that driver's license? Did you regret that you waited so long to have that extra independence?
No, I really didn't drive for another 6 months after I got the license, but I moved around that time too, so that had something to do with it. And once I moved states, I had a little bit easier time driving with fewer hills.
Oh, so it was the hills. I think you moved to a busier city from what you were used to. Was that challenging to learn there?
A little bit, but it helped that where I live now, the speed limits aren't too high in the city, so everyone pretty much goes kind of slow-ish.
All right. Wow. Well, so that was a big milestone and a big hurdle to make your way through. And yeah, God was there. So how has God, other stories of how God has been a father to you through other men and in other ways? Did you automatically look to God as your father? Or was that a transition to understanding that, well, in the absence of dad, God is present? How did you shift and make that transition?
People told me when I was 13 that God will be my father now. And it took some time to realize how that would be the case. But I think slowly through seeing how God has worked through other people in my life and how they have done things that my father would have done, or even just being a friend in a hard time, and then also seeing Bible verses pop up in my life at times that I really needed it and I didn't even know. Um, that kind of thing slowly put together, and I realized, oh, this is how God's going to be my father. That makes sense.
Right. You can tell someone God's a father to the fatherless, but for a young person or even for a teenager, well, he's not here with hands on. So it is learning and experiencing God as father. He declares himself to be father. That's why it's perspective ministries. It's having that focus and that looking for God in our lives. And it sounds like he was not hard to find in the way that he was very present through the men that he brought into your life. Why don't you tell them about your 16th birthday? I know your mom. I personally know Emaline and her mom, and it's just been beautiful to watch. Her mom was extremely intentional raising you, Emaline, to know the Lord and to cherish the memories of your dad and to also look to God as father. So what was the special way that she helped you celebrate your 16th birthday, which is another big milestone?
Yes. Well, she surprised me on the morning of my 16th birthday with a huge scrapbook that had 3 sections. The first section had pictures from every birthday party she'd ever thrown me for my first 15 years. And also the little invitation was slipped into the scrapbook too, so I could see all the memories of my growing up. She also always went out for the birthday parties. Both of my parents made everyone super special with fun activities and fun decorations, lots of themes. So having that section was really exciting to look through because it's all my memories and parties that I did with my mom and my dad and all my friends. And then the second section was full of letters that she reached out to all the men in my life and asked them to write me with fatherly advice. So the middle section has about 12 or 13 letters from different men who influenced me. They each gave me advice that they had given their own daughters or that they would give their daughter if they had one. things that they wanted me to know. One in particular gave me his phone number and said, "If anybody ever gives you a problem, call me." Offering to pick me up in the middle of the night if I'm somewhere and I need someone to take me home. And lots of practical advice and also just godly advice, all kinds of lovely things they wrote to me. And I go back and read it sometimes when I'm really missing my dad or needing some help somewhere.
And that was our third section, or you said it was just
The third
okay.
section was my mom printed out some sayings about God's promises about us. God says we're beautifully and wonderfully made, and all kinds of biblically derived promises that God has for us.
Well, I have tears as I hear you describe that and chills because what a gift, Emaline. What a gift. And moms, this might be something you would consider doing for your daughter. Strolling down memory lane. Sometimes if we have a really young child who never really knew their dad, we can tell stories of their dad. There's nothing wrong about remembering. That's biblical. Remembering, and then also remembering God's faithfulness is also biblical. And then to have practical tips and guidance from other men and men who would share this information with their own daughters. I imagine that very much felt like God was being your father at that point through these men. And so I would love to read some of the practical tips that they shared because I'm sure it was helpful. And like you said, you go back and read them because as a 13-year-old, they might have been speaking into your life of things you would need to know when you were a little bit older, when you started dating, and maybe when you did go to college, and prayerfully when you started looking for the man you're going to marry. So and then God's promises. Wow. Wow. That's a treasure. Thank you for sharing that. So what was it like going off to college? I know that was probably a big step, moving out of state, and tell us about those years.
Well, first I went to college at a big school in Georgia that it wasn't the right fit for me. But I spent my first year there. It was a very large secular school, and I had come from a very large secular high school. So I thought it was going to work, but it really didn't. It was a much bigger school than I was expecting. I felt like just a number at this particular place, and I was really looking for something where I was going to be able to meet people and get to know students in my classes without it being a completely different set of students every single class, even within my major. So I found another school that was in a different state and a small private Christian school. And so my mom and I both moved. We weren't ready to be a state apart yet. And she had always wanted to move to Florida. So we moved to Florida. And I fell in love with my school. I did my sophomore, junior, senior year. I found a place in the choir. I've always loved singing, and this choir in particular feels like a family. Our director has really fostered a place where we became friends, and they really are like family. That's an example of more men that God brought into my life as well. I have male friends that I know I can call if I break down on the side of the road, and they're there for me. So that was my undergrad years, and I loved the school so much and the choir so much that I stayed, and I'm getting my master's at the same school.
Your dad would be so proud of you. I can tell you that much. He would be so proud of the woman you have become. Truly, I did not know your dad. I knew of your dad. I went to your memorial. You may not know that, but I was just drawn to go to your memorial. Your dad was known for, I think he was known for just being the life of the party, very funny and creative and vibrant. And so that's a lot of loss that you've walked through and the suffering that you've experienced, but you have kept your focus on the Lord and He's been faithful. So when do you graduate with your master's?
I started the program last semester, so it should be 2027.
Okay. Okay. So, what has it looked like, if you don't mind me asking, dating or as you're anticipating getting married one day? Do you have any, I don't want to say fears, but apprehension about your wedding day and who will walk you down the aisle? Have you thought about that?
I have. That's always been in the back of my mind. I actually remember on the day that my dad died when I was 13, we got home from the hospital, and that night I asked my mom, "Who's going to walk me down the aisle?" That was,
It is the first question of a little girl.
yeah. And she said, "Whoever I want." That she would do it if I want her to, or if there's someone else in my life by the time I get married, that they're like, she would not be offended if I picked someone else to do it. Um, I still don't know. That's something I'll get to later. I'm not anywhere close to that right now.
Well, it sounds like you have choices, and there's also options. I've had daughters. You're an only child, but I've had daughters. Their brother walked them down the aisle. A mentor walked one of my daughters down the aisle, and then I had one who used the parable of the 10 virgins as the theme for her wedding, and she walked herself down the aisle. And then it makes me cry every time I tell the story. Um, her husband met her, like it was time to go get the bride, representative of Christ, coming back to get the church. And there was not a dry eye. So God is so creative, and he's walked you this far. He's not going to leave you stranded at the aisle of your wedding. He's going to show you, be the best way for you to enter in at that special moment.
One idea that I really liked that I've seen online is a girl who covered her shoes with some of the fabric from her dad's ties so that her dad kind of walked her down the aisle.
Oh, no, that's very I can see you doing that, Emmeline. That's extremely creative. I love that idea. Wow. Well, is there any encouragement that you would like to share with a mom who is at the beginning of this journey, or a mom who is raising a daughter without her dad? Any thoughts on what would be helpful? And then we can close with some thoughts to any fatherless young women who are listening. How would you encourage them?
I would encourage a mother of a fatherless child by saying, I think one of the most important things is just being present with your child. In my experience, my mom and I were super close, and we spent a lot of time together. We had a mantra for the two of us that we were only going to do what we could do, and we would forgive each other for all the rest. If there was something that didn't happen that should have, we didn't stake on it. It was always just, we did what we could, and that's where we are, and we're okay with that. I think that was very helpful for me growing up, and for her as well. It took some pressure off of both of us. So I think being present and being forgiving are two really big things. Advice for both mothers and their children.
Very, very good. Such wisdom, such wisdom. Mom, release yourself of so many things. You most likely had no idea you were going to be raising your child or your children as the solo parent. And so grace is necessary, and forgiveness. Forgive yourself. Forgive your children. Again, we're all grieving. Grief doesn't look good on anyone. And we are going to make mistakes. We do make mistakes. And yet we learn and we keep moving forward, and we give lots of grace and forgiveness. So just such wisdom. Thank you, Emaline. Anything else you want to say or share in closing?
I would say one more piece of advice to another child going through the loss of their father or having a fatherless circumstance is one thing that really has made the journey different for me, that has been really helpful, is I have some really close friends who have also experienced fatherlessness. One in particular, that we lost our fathers about 2 years apart, and it's just really nice to have a friend that I know understands exactly what I'm going through. I mean, it's different with every circumstance, but still, someone that I can text and say, "Hey, I'm having a hard day," and I don't have to explain it because he already knows. That's something that I found really helpful, that I think would be helpful to other kids too.
There's just something about understanding and sharing loss with someone who you don't have to really say much. They just get it. And I'm glad that the Lord gave you a friend or friends who were there for you in that way too. It's, sometimes we try to come along someone and we try to identify and walk into their pain. But if that's not our experience, we just can't. We just aren't able. Not that we can't be present, as we talked about, but there's something unique about having someone who can relate. You can relate to. So I'm glad you have that gift. Well, when did you come to know the Lord, Emaline?
I came to know the Lord when I was 6. I was baptized at a very young age.
Yeah, so you were already a Christian when you went through this suffering as a child, and that's important, and that helps. But sometimes the Lord will work in other ways. Sometimes He will take, as we know, trials and suffering to test our faith, to strengthen our faith, and sometimes they will show us we don't have faith. And so if that's someone listening today and maybe you're exploring, I don't know how I even got on this podcast. I don't even know why I'm listening to this today. It may be because we want to encourage you that God loves you and He is there for you. If you have experienced a loss by death, He does promise to be a father to the fatherless. For anyone walking through life without a father, not only death, but divorce and desertion. And for single moms who have gone through the unimaginable pain, God is there and He will be faithful to you. Well, Emaline, I'm so glad you shared your story today. Emaline is one of the contributors in our book, Absent Dad, Present Father. That will be coming out soon if it's not already out. And I'm so excited. That book includes 30 testimonies of men and women who experienced an absent dad. And just like Emaline has testified today, they also talk about how God was a father to the fatherless, how He was present in this absence. And so thank you, Emaline, so much. I pray the Lord will bless you. And moms, I hope you'll come back next week. Have a good day.